with one of these articles in New York Times, it mentions the number of American military personnel in the Middle East has exceeded 50,000. And when it comes to these numbers, 4,000, 50,000, 12,000, if the United States decides to invade Iran, to go to one of these, islands in the Persian Gulf, close to the Strait of Hormuz, is that possible with these numbers? Because it's somehow you have to, if I remember correctly, during the war in Ukraine, when it comes to the ground invasion, you have to have some sort of dominance 3-1. When you attack, you have. But when it comes to island, that could be different. You capture an island, but sustaining and keeping that island is important as well, and not just capturing in a short period of time and getting a lot of casualties. What is your understanding of the way that Donald Trump is talking about invading, and it seems that they're serious and they're gonna go in that direction?
Well, it depends very much on what the U.S. has in mind and Trump has in mind. As you rightly said, if it's about taking over a couple of islands, and you have a couple of islands in the Strait of Hormuz, like the Lesser Toon, the Greater Toon, Abu Musa, and this kind of small islands, they can probably be taken very quickly by a very small force. And probably they can even be kept for a while with those forces. The same applies to Harg Island. It may probably be possible by some trained units to gain foot on the Harg Island and stay there for a while. The problem is, when you talk about invading Iran, this is a completely different story. Those islands, first of all, if you have them, you have to figure out what you want to do with them. If the purpose of having those islands is to maintain a free traffic on the Strait of Hormuz, I'm talking about the three, the Lesser, Greater Toon, and the Abu Musa as an example. You can probably stay for a while, but again, the problem is that the Iranians, because of their superiority in terms of missiles and all that, I'm not sure such a force, a U.S. force, can maintain its presence for a very long time. So, and probably they can be decimated very quickly by some. And apparently, Iran is not ready to let such a force to stay for a long time on those islands. So this is certainly on Harg. The problem is slightly different because, of course, this is an oil terminal with huge importance for Iran, by the way, and with the economic significance. Now, my feeling is, and I have read somewhere, I'm not sure if this is the policy, but I would expect, if I were American, that the Iranians would prefer to destroy the whole potential of Harg Island rather than letting the US stay on the island. And in fact, if you think about it, if you have a force that can install itself on the island and keep control over the oil terminals, essentially you have lost this terminal. So therefore, it's the same price for you to destroy everything. So in that case, I don't see exactly what the US is aiming at by keeping those forces, because they may probably, it's probably more a PR exercise than anything else. We had similar issues, remember, probably at the very beginning of the Ukraine war with the so-called Snake Island, which was a rock just close to the Romanian border, by the way, the Romanian shore. And the Ukrainians took this rock. They had a presence on this rock. They surrendered, and the Russians then left this rock empty. But then the Ukrainians came back and claimed a victory over the Russians by taking this rock back, and the Russians just bombed the rock and, in fact, annihilated everything on this rock. So we may have something very similar at play in those islands in the Persian Gulf. Now, when it comes to invasion of Iran, this is a totally different story. And I'm not sure exactly what a force for 50,000, even 100,000 people could even achieve there. Because, first of all, the occupation, it's not just a matter of the force ratio. It's a matter of how you sustain your presence on such a country, because obviously, and especially in Iran, by the way, because it's a huge country, when you have a force that requires a lot of logistics, how can you afford to do that? Um, especially if the Iranians have, as I said, the supremacy or the superiority in terms of missiles and drones and all that. So I'm not sure exactly what the Americans could achieve. They can probably achieve to get here a bridgehead, and get some presence, but then I'm not sure they can achieve any significant operational and even strategic success in uh, in Iran. So I think all what we heard, and again, I don't know what's in the mind of Donald Trump, but my feeling is that everything we see at this stage is rather like a PR exercise rather than a real and imminent danger for Iran. It's probably an imminent danger for the US, if I can put it that way, rather than an imminent danger for Iran. The invading Iran requires a huge amount of forces. And remember that the Americans have tried already in 1980 with Operation Eagle Claw, when they had this special operation to rescue the hostages of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. So they had a special operations with several C-130 aircraft and several helicopter for specially designed for special operations, and this operation failed miserably, and that was one of the most and then you can probably still see the remnants of this catastrophe, because some helicopters crashed, one or two C-30 aircraft also crashed in the desert, killing a lot of soldiers there. So and again, I'm not aware because I haven't been in Iran, but apparently the site remains and can be visited to some extent. I don't know exactly. In any case, it shows that with all the power you may have and all the skills of special operations, airborne forces, and whatever, it's very hard to achieve a special operation in such a country. The problem in this case was, among others, there were obviously planning problems. There were also coordination problems within the U.S. force, because they wanted to keep the whole thing secret, and therefore the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and that led to the catastrophe. But an issue that was related to the complexity of this operation was the distances, because Iran is huge. And when you start, they wanted to land their plane in a very quiet place with not too many people around to see and watch and witness all that. So that means you have to go very far away, and the distances are a challenge in itself. And okay, if the US would like to invade Iran, this would certainly not be the same kind of operation, but you still have some elements of that will affect the invasion, or possible, or let's say a planned invasion, because of the distances, the kind of the terrain. If you look at the map, you would see that the whole shore, I mean, yes, all the part of Iran which is close to the Persian Gulf is very mountainous. That means that in those places you can have some guerrilla warfare. You can make the life absolutely impossible to any invading force. This is a situation that you barely had in Iraq, which is in essence a very flat country, except in the north, up in the north. But in Iran, that would be a very different story, because to access Tehran, you have to go through a very difficult terrain where it's very easy to ambush and stop vehicles. So I don't see exactly how they would like to do that. It requires certainly hundreds of thousands of soldiers, a huge logistical capability, and of course under the permanent threat of drones, missiles, short range missiles, and the long range missile. I mean or the mid range missiles, those who can reach Israel, will continue to be fired. So I don't see exactly what would be the benefit of such an operation. We still don't see the benefit of the operation at this stage, and I'm sure, and sorry, I'm not sure that escalating this operation and trying to convert this aggression into an invasion would be to the benefit of both Israel and the U.S. So
What would be the way out, Carl, in your opinion, for Donald Trump? Because it seems to me as time goes by, Iran is getting, because Iran is defending itself. Iran is not attacking anybody. That's why they're so comfortable with, as time goes by, to defend Iran, and they know what they're doing. But the United States and Israel are attacking, trying to, talking about invading Iran. This is the whole two different scenarios on the part of the United States, on the part of Iranians. But what would be the way out for Donald Trump? He somehow, you see the way he talks about the situation, you see a lot of desperation happening in the way that he's talking about. How what is your understanding of the current situation of Donald Trump and his, sort of, he has made some sort of trap for himself in the West Asia.
well, same thing for Netanyahu. In fact, both are trapped into their decision, and they are trapped into their arrogance and their hubris, because they expected a very quick success. They expected a very fast victory, and this is not coming. And despite the experience they had during the 12-day war in 2025, they didn't understand or drew the lessons from that 12-day war. And today they are still uh, thinking they may achieve some kind of success. The problem is that the longer it takes, the longer it will be to define what success can be. Because what we see right now in Iran, it's not just the fact that Iran defends itself, but it's also consolidating itself. We see that with time, the population gets more united as before. We see that they are still, because they're not just firing the missiles, they're also producing additional missiles. So this is a kind of the system, the machinery, the military industrial complex machinery is moving ahead in Iran, meaning that they are producing missiles, they are producing things, they're getting more support, um, political support, I mean, from outside, and probably even more technical support. I'm not sure exactly what kind, but I can expect that you may have more support from Russia and in some form from China. but meaning that the Iranians are not isolated and they get less and less isolated. And you see that even in the Gulf, people in the first move, they reacted and said they wanted to fight against Iran. And now they realize that probably this is not the wisest thing to do, and they now call for a dialogue and call for an appeasement in the region. So, and you see the same thing in the US. Basically, the US understands that this was they overestimated the probability of success, and now they are not achieving that. So the thing is that we are now in the same situation as in Ukraine. The obvious solution would be to have talks with the Iranians, but the Trump and his administration is not used to have talks. They impose a solution, and that's exactly what they just made with this 15 points plan. They come, they put the 15 points on the table and say, well, take it or leave it, more or less. That's what they have done for Gaza. This is what they tried to do with Russia last year with those 20 points plan. And it didn't work because now they have adversaries who are able to respond and are confident that they can respond. Therefore, a negotiation today cannot be just a simple a proposal you can't refuse. This has to be a dialogue, and the solution must be done by the two parties in a real diplomatic type of dialogue where both parties say what they want to achieve. The problem is that the more you wait for that, the more Iran will gain influence and the more the US will lose influence. And we see that already, because as of today, this is the US who come up with a plan because they feel they can achieve something, but they want to stop the whole thing. They want to keep their face, and therefore they try to impose something, but they are the ones who try to stop the machinery. And um, and that's exactly the problem, because Iran has basically refused this dialogue, because they say, well, if you want to have a dialogue, you need to come with responsible proposals. And what we want is, and nota bene, it's almost exactly the same thing you have with Russia. They don't want a ceasefire. They don't want just to pause. They want to have a solution. Iran has been threatened since about 3 decades now, to be attacked by both Israel and the US. Now, Iran wants to put a final stop to this whole process. And now it has the opportunity. Trump has given Iran the opportunity to achieve a full stop for that. And that's exactly what Iran will strive for. So this is now, the more Trump waits, the more the more Iran will gain advantage, and the less freedom of decision the US will have. And that's we have exactly the same thing with Ukraine. And that's the reason why, nota bene, on both sides, Vladimir Putin said, well, if you don't want to negotiate, no problem, we'll continue. We'll achieve what we want through force. And you have exactly the same answer given by Foreign Minister Arakchi and others in Iran. They say, well, if you don't want to address the fundamental issue of the problem, and if you don't want to go towards definitive peace, then we'll continue. And the price for that, and that's something I said even before the war when we discussed on your channel, That's already more than about 2 months ago. I said, well, the price for an attack, what is then at stake is the existence of Israel, because obviously Iran cannot destroy the US, but it can destroy Israel, and it can destroy probably not the population, but it can make the life in Israel absolutely impossible. And we have already signs of this. So uh, the thing is, the more the US and Israel wait for any political solution, and the more Iran will have a leverage on them. And that's exactly where we are. So, in essence, we may have tactical success from the U.S.-Israeli coalition, in the sense that they can probably destroy a few command centers and things like this, and bomb a few places in Iran. These are tactical issues, but they have no strategic impact. We have seen that, for instance, killing Ali Khamenei was, in essence, a tactical success, but not a strategic one, because it has not influenced the capacity of Iran to make decisions and to continue fighting. So, in that sense, killing Khamenei was a tactical success, but not a strategic one. And Iran, if you look now the balance between the two, you can see that, and as usual, because that's something I have also noticed on the Ukrainian conflict, and you see that in all the wars the West has waged in the last 30 years, we wage wars at tactical level, while others wage war at strategic level. And even the terrorists, in fact, have waged wars at strategic level. It was less successful because, obviously, fortunately, they have less power, but nevertheless, they were not completely defeated. And in fact, it's exactly what we see when we talk about defeating ISIS. For instance, the US never managed to defeat ISIS. It just changed its form. It just changed name. It just changed its appearance. But the spirit of the whole thing has not disappeared. So all the wars we wage are tactical wars. And now with Iran, the US is confronted to a new situation, because it has not exactly a peer, because US is much more powerful. If you take the global reach and capabilities of the US, it's obviously much stronger. But if you look just at the Middle East theater, they are, in the balance of forces more or less there. So the US is a peer, and even Iran, or even Israel, who used to think that they were superior to Iran, they notice they are not. Meaning that we have here a very balanced theater of operation, if you want. And that's exactly the situation what the US has never had previously in the last 30 years, and probably even more. So now they are confronted with a force they cannot defeat, at least not in the short term. Maybe if this would last for 20 years, maybe, or I may say 20 years, maybe 1 or 2 years, I don't know. But what I mean is that Iran cannot be defeated in a short run, as it was anticipated by the US-Israeli coalition. And that makes Iran much stronger. That makes Iran a very credible actor in the Middle East. And when I say credible actor, that means that now you may have a few Arab countries who understand that it's probably a good idea to have good relations with Iran. And instead of having US bases that attract fire on you, it's probably better to have a deal with Iran. And so that's the situation. So we are US on the path of a strategic defeat, and Iran on the path of a strategic victory. We can summarize that way.